Commander Zektar clicked his mandibles in frustration as he watched the human soldiers prepare for the mission. Their movements were slow and clumsy compared to his own species, the Velkari. Where a Velkari warrior could leap 15 meters in a single bound, these humans stumbled over their own feet. Where his people could see clearly in near total darkness, the humans needed artificial lights just to walk without tripping. "This is foolish," Zektar muttered to his aide, Jorman. "The Council expects us to work with these creatures? They cannot even see properly in the dark." The human commander, a female named Sarah Chen, approached their position. She was small even by human standards, barely reaching Zektar's chest. Her pale skin looked fragile, like it would tear at the slightest touch. Most insulting of all, she carried weapons that seemed primitive compared to Velkari energy rifles. "Commander Zektar?" Chen said, her voice steady despite her obvious physical weakness. "I understand you have concerns about joint operations." Zektar's translator made her words sound mechanical, but he caught the meaning. "Concerns? Human. My species has been fighting wars since before your people discovered fire. We move like shadows and strike like lightning. You lumber around like wounded prey animals." Several human soldiers nearby turned at his words. Zektar expected anger, but instead saw something he didn't recognize. The humans exchanged glances, and some even made that strange facial expression where they bared their teeth, what they called smiling. "I see," Chen said calmly. "Perhaps we can learn from each other during this mission." The mission was supposed to be simple. Intelligence suggested that pirates had established a base in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system. These weren't ordinary criminals. They had been attacking both human and Velkari cargo ships, stealing supplies meant for the outer colonies. The joint task force was meant to eliminate the threat quickly and quietly. Zektar's ship, the Wind Dancer, was a masterpiece of Velkari engineering. It moved through space with grace and speed, its hull designed to bend light around it for near-perfect stealth. The human ship, Resolute, looked like a flying brick in comparison, all harsh angles and thick armor plating. "Why do they build their ships so heavy?" Jorman wondered aloud as they watched the human vessel through their view screen. "Because they lack elegance," Zektar replied. "Look at how it moves, like a rock thrown through space, no finesse, no style." As they approached the asteroid field, Zektar's confidence grew. His sensors could detect the pirate base easily, a hollowed-out asteroid fitted with shields and weapons. The plan was for the Velkari to use their superior stealth to scout the location, then call in the humans for the heavy assault. "Beginning stealth approach," Zektar announced over the communications channel. "Human vessel, maintain position until we signal." "Understood," came Chen's reply. "Good hunting, Commander." The Wind Dancer slipped through the asteroid field like smoke. Zektar felt pride surge through him as his ship avoided detection by the pirate sensors. This was what true military skill looked like: precision, grace, and superior technology working in perfect harmony. The pirate base was larger than expected. Zektar counted at least 50 armed vessels docked around the asteroid, plus defensive turrets and shield generators. More concerning was the energy signature coming from deep within the rock. It suggested a much larger operation than intelligence had indicated. "Jorman, are you detecting what I'm detecting?" Zektar asked. His aide's mandibles clicked nervously. "Yes, sir. The base appears to house approximately 3,000 pirates, not the few hundred we expected. And those weapons, some of them are military-grade hardware." Zektar felt his confidence waver. 3,000 enemies was far too many for their small strike force to handle. The logical choice was to retreat and call for reinforcements. But that would mean admitting failure, and worse, it would mean the humans had been right to bring their heavily armored ship. "Sir," the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the pirate base. They're demanding we identify ourselves. Impossible, Zektar hissed. Our stealth systems are perfect. They cannot detect us. But the evidence was clear on his sensors. Multiple pirate ships were moving toward their position, and weapons were powering up throughout the base. Somehow the pirates had spotted them despite their advanced cloaking technology. "All ships, this is Commander Chen," came the human's voice over the radio. "We're detecting hostile movement in your area. What's your status?" Zektar hesitated. Admitting that his stealth approach had failed would be humiliating. But as pirate vessels began emerging from behind asteroids all around his position, pride seemed less important than survival. "We have been detected," he said finally. "The enemy force is much larger than expected. We may need assistance." "On our way," Chen replied without hesitation. "All human vessels, prepare for combat." What happened next challenged everything Zektar thought he knew about space combat. The human ships didn't try to be clever or elegant. They simply charged straight into the asteroid field, their thick armor absorbing hits from pirate weapons while returning devastating fire. The Resolute took a direct hit from a missile that would have crippled a Velkari vessel. The explosion sent debris flying in all directions, and Zektar was certain the human ship was destroyed. But when the smoke cleared, the Resolute was still there, still fighting. Its armor was scarred and blackened, but its weapons kept firing. "How is that possible?" Jormin gasped. Zektar watched in amazement as human ships absorbed punishment that should have been fatal. They traded elegance for endurance, speed for strength. Where Velkari vessels danced around enemy fire, human ships simply ignored it and kept advancing. "Commander Zektar," Chen's voice came through the radio, calm despite the chaos around her ship. "We're going to punch through their outer perimeter. Can your ship use its stealth capabilities to get inside their base?" "You want us to infiltrate while you're under fire?" Zektar asked. "That's the idea. Your ship can slip through while they're focused on us. Plant charges on their shield generators and weapon systems. We'll keep them busy." It was a sound tactical plan, but it required the humans to essentially sacrifice themselves to create the distraction. Zektar watched as another missile struck the Resolute, this one tearing a hole in the ship's hull. Atmosphere vented into space, carrying with it what looked like debris and possibly bodies. "Your ship is damaged," Zektar said. "You should retreat." "Negative," Chen replied. "We can take more punishment. Go now, while they're distracted." Against his better judgment, Zektar ordered his ship forward. The Wind Dancer slipped through the chaos of the battle, using its stealth systems to avoid detection, while the pirates focused their fire on the human vessels. It felt wrong to leave the humans to face such overwhelming odds, but Zektar told himself it was the only logical choice. As they approached the pirate base, Zektar got his first close look at the humans in action. Through his ship's sensors, he could observe individual human fighters engaging pirate boarding parties that had managed to reach the Resolute. What he saw confused him. The humans moved differently than he expected. They weren't trying to be graceful or elegant like Velkari warriors. Instead, they used their environment, taking cover behind debris and using tools as weapons when their guns ran out of ammunition. When pirates tried to board their ship, the humans didn't fight with honor or follow conventional tactics. They fought dirty, using every advantage they could find. One human soldier, his armor damaged and his weapon destroyed, grabbed a piece of broken metal and used it to strike a pirate in the head. When that pirate fell, the human took his weapon and kept fighting. Another human, clearly wounded and bleeding, rigged an explosive device from spare parts and used it to destroy an entire group of enemy fighters. "They fight like animals," Jormin observed. But Zektar was beginning to think differently. "No," he said slowly, "they fight like survivors." The Wind Dancer reached the pirate base undetected. Zektar's team quickly planted explosive charges on the shield generators and primary weapon systems. It was precision work, requiring them to navigate through the asteroid's tunnels while avoiding patrols. The Velkari's natural agility and stealth made the job relatively easy. As they prepared to withdraw, Zektar received an urgent transmission from the Resolute. The message was broken and filled with static, but he could make out Chen's voice. Zektar, hull breach, losing life support, charges, set. The human ship was dying, but Chen was still asking about the mission. Through his sensors, Zektar could see that the Resolute had lost main power and was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Several human ships had been destroyed entirely, their crews dead or dying in the cold vacuum of space. Charges are set, Zektar replied. You need to evacuate your people. Negative. Keeping pirates busy. Detonate charges on my signal. Zektar stared at his communications panel in disbelief. The humans were going to sacrifice themselves to ensure the mission's success. It went against every principle of civilized warfare he had been taught. Casualties were supposed to be avoided, not embraced. Human commander, your crew will die if you maintain position, Zektar said. Some things are worth dying for, Chen replied simply. As the Wind Dancer pulled away from the pirate base, Zektar found himself thinking about those words. Some things are worth dying for. In Velkari culture, death in battle was considered a failure of planning or skill. A good warrior survived to fight another day, but these humans seemed to view sacrifice differently, not as failure, but as a choice. The charges detonated on Chen's signal, destroying the pirate base's shields and primary weapons. The explosion was visible even through the asteroid field, a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded their sensors. When vision cleared, the pirate base was crippled and defenseless, but Zektar barely noticed the successful mission. His attention was fixed on the human ships, or what was left of them. The Resolute was listing badly, its hull cracked open like a broken egg. Several other human vessels were completely destroyed, nothing left but debris fields. Sir, Yormin said quietly, the humans, they actually did it. They held off the entire pirate fleet long enough for us to complete the mission. Zektar nodded slowly, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. The humans had been outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outnumbered. By every logical measure, they should have retreated or been destroyed in the first few minutes of combat. Instead, they had absorbed punishment that would have shattered a Velkari fleet and kept fighting. Begin rescue operations, Zektar ordered. All Velkari vessels, search for human survivors. As his ship moved through the debris field, Zektar received a weak transmission from an emergency beacon. It was coming from a damaged human shuttle that had been blown clear of the Resolute during the battle. Inside, his rescue team found 3 human crew members, all wounded but alive. One of them was Commander Chen. As the medical team worked to stabilize the human survivors, Zektar visited the medical bay. Chen was conscious despite her injuries, burns from radiation exposure and what appeared to be several broken bones. She should have been in agony, but when she saw Zektar, she attempted to sit up. Mission status? She asked weakly. The pirate base is destroyed, Zektar replied. Your sacrifice was not in vain. Chen managed a weak smile. Good. My crew? Zektar hesitated. They had found only 12 human survivors out of a fleet that had carried nearly 200 crew members. There are survivors, he said finally. Chen nodded, seeming to understand what he didn't say. The others knew the risks, we all did. That's what we signed up for. As Zektar looked at this small, injured human female, he began to realize that everything he thought he knew about strength might be wrong. Physical power and technological superiority were impressive, but they meant nothing without the will to use them. And these humans possessed something his people had forgotten: the willingness to pay any price for what they believed in. The rescue operations continued for hours, but in the end, they found pitifully few human survivors. The majority of the human fleet had been destroyed, their crews dead or missing. It should have been a devastating defeat, but somehow it felt like victory. The pirate threat was eliminated, the trade routes were safe, and the mission was complete. But Zektar found himself thinking about the cost. The humans had paid it willingly, without hesitation or complaint. They had looked death in the face and charged forward anyway. As the Velkari fleet prepared to return home, Zektar stood on his ship's observation deck, looking out at the asteroid field where so many humans had died. He had come here believing that strength meant speed, agility, and superior firepower. But the humans had taught him something different. True strength wasn't about being the fastest or the strongest or the most technologically advanced. True strength was about standing firm when everything around you was falling apart, about making the hard choices that others couldn't or wouldn't make. The humans had shown him what real warriors looked like, and Zektar knew he would never forget the lesson. The journey back to the Joint Command Station took 3 days. During that time, Zektar found himself visiting the medical bay more often than necessary. The human survivors were recovering slowly. Their bodies seemed to heal differently than Velkari physiology, more gradually but with surprising resilience. Commander Chen had slipped into a coma on the 2nd day. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Velmoth, explained that her injuries were severe. Radiation poisoning, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding should have killed her hours ago, yet her vital signs remained stable, her body somehow continuing to function despite damage that would have been fatal to most species. "It's remarkable," Dr. Velmoth said, studying the medical readings. "Her cellular structure seems designed to withstand trauma. Look at these bone density measurements. They're healing at an accelerated rate despite the severity of the breaks." Zektar studied the data with growing fascination. "Are all humans built this way?" "From what I can determine, yes. Their entire physiology seems oriented toward survival in hostile conditions. High bone density, redundant organ systems, accelerated healing. It's as if they evolved in an environment that was constantly trying to kill them." That evening, one of the conscious human survivors, a young male named Rodriguez, asked to speak with Zektar. He was sitting up in his medical bed, his left arm in a regeneration cast and bandages covering burns across his chest. Despite his injuries, he seemed alert and focused. "Commander," Rodriguez said when Zektar approached, "I wanted to thank you for the rescue operation. Most commanders would have written us off as acceptable losses." "Your sacrifice saved the mission," Zektar replied, unsure how to respond to gratitude for basic decency. "It was the least we could do." Rodriguez nodded, then asked, "Can I ask you something? Before the battle, you seemed surprised by how we fought. Why?" Zektar considered his words carefully. "Your people fought without regard for your own safety. In Velkari military doctrine, such tactics are considered wasteful." "Wasteful?" Rodriguez looked genuinely confused. "Sir, with respect, we weren't being wasteful. We were being practical." "Practical? Your fleet was nearly destroyed." Rodriguez shifted in his bed, wincing slightly from his injuries. "Commander, may I tell you something about humans, about where we come from?" Zektar gestured for him to continue. "Our homeworld, Earth, isn't like most planets. It's what your people would probably call a death world. Massive storms that can level cities, earthquakes that can swallow mountains, predators that hunt in packs and never give up. The oceans are filled with creatures that can swallow a ship whole, and the continents have weather patterns that change from freezing to burning in the span of hours." Rodriguez paused, his eyes taking on a distant look. "My grandfather used to tell stories about the old days, before we had advanced technology. Humans would hunt animals 10 times their size with nothing but pointed sticks. They'd walk across entire continents on foot, carrying everything they owned on their backs. They'd sail across oceans in wooden boats, not knowing if there was anything on the other side. That sounds... Zektar searched for the right word. Terrifying. To you, maybe. To us, it's just Tuesday. Rodriguez smiled, that strange human expression that still puzzled Zektar. See, Commander, that's what you don't understand about the battle. We weren't being careless with our lives. We were doing what humans have always done, paying whatever price is necessary to protect what matters. Zektar thought about this as he made his rounds that night. The human perspective was alien to him in ways he was only beginning to grasp. Where Velkari culture valued efficiency and elegance, humans seemed to value persistence and determination. Where his people sought to minimize risk, humans seemed willing to accept almost any risk if the cause was worth it. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. The ship's communications officer reported that they were receiving a distress signal from a civilian transport vessel. The ship was carrying refugees from the outer colonies and had suffered mechanical failure in a dangerous region of space known for gravitational anomalies. The transport is the New Haven, the communications officer reported. They're carrying approximately 800 civilians, including families with children. Their life support is failing, and they're being pulled toward the gravity well of a collapsed star. Zektar studied the tactical display. The rescue would be dangerous. The gravitational fields in that region could tear apart even military vessels if they got too close. A sensible approach would be to contact the nearest rescue station and wait for proper salvage ships. "Sir," Rodriguez said from behind him. Zektar turned, surprised to see the injured human had left his medical bed and come to the bridge. "I know it's not my place, but that transport needs help now. By the time rescue ships arrive, they'll all be dead." "You should be in medical," Zektar replied. "Your injuries are healing fine." Rodriguez moved to the tactical display, though Zektar noticed he was still favoring his injured arm. "Commander, I've run convoy escort through that region before. There's a safe approach vector, but it requires precise timing and a ship capable of withstanding severe gravitational stress." Jorman clicked his mandibles nervously. "Our ship isn't designed for such conditions. The structural stress could tear us apart." "Then we modify our approach," Rodriguez said. "Use the gravitational fields to our advantage instead of fighting them. It's dangerous, but it can be done." Zektar found himself facing a decision that would have been simple a week ago. The logical choice was to maintain course and contact proper rescue vessels. The refugees' situation was tragic, but risking his ship and crew for civilians he had never met made no tactical sense. But something had changed in his thinking since the pirate battle. The memory of Commander Chen sacrificing her fleet to protect others haunted him. What good was superior technology and elegant tactics if he wasn't willing to use them when they were truly needed? "Navigation," Zektar said finally. "Plot a rescue course. Mr. Rodriguez, if you're well enough to leave medical, you're well enough to serve as an advisor." The journey to the New Haven took 6 hours of careful navigation through some of the most dangerous space Zektar had ever encountered. Rodriguez proved invaluable, his experience with gravitational anomalies allowing them to use the very forces that threatened to destroy them as aids to navigation. "Human merchants regularly travel through this region?" Zektar asked as they navigated between two massive gravity wells. "Not regularly," Rodriguez admitted, "but often enough. The shortest route between Earth and the outer colonies passes through here. Most species avoid it entirely, but humans, well, we've always taken the dangerous path if it gets us where we need to go faster." When they finally reached the New Haven, Zektar was shocked by what he saw. The civilian transport was indeed being pulled toward the gravity well of the collapsed star. but the ship itself was a marvel of engineering. Not elegant like Valkyrie vessels, but incredibly robust. It was maintaining structural integrity despite gravitational forces that should have crushed it hours ago. "How is that ship still in one piece?" Yorman asked. Rodriguez studied the readings. "Human engineering philosophy. We build things to last. That transport was designed to carry families to new worlds, so the engineers built it to survive anything space could throw at it. Redundant systems, reinforced hull plating, backup generators for the backup generators." The rescue operation took 8 hours. Using a combination of tractor beams and careful maneuvering, they managed to pull the New Haven free of the gravity well and escort it to safe space. During the operation, Zektar had the opportunity to speak with the transport's captain, an elderly human woman named Captain Martinez. "I can't thank you enough," Martinez said over the communication channel. "We were preparing to evacuate to the escape pods, but with 800 people..." "How many escape pods does your ship carry?" Zektar asked. "Enough for everyone, with some to spare. We don't build ships that can't save their passengers." Zektar was surprised. "Most civilian vessels carry the minimum required safety equipment." Martinez laughed, though her voice carried stress from the ordeal. "Commander, these aren't just passengers. These are families starting new lives on frontier worlds. Every person on this ship represents someone's hope for a better future. We don't take that responsibility lightly." After the rescue was complete, and the New Haven was safely on course for its destination, Zektar found himself thinking about Captain Martinez's words. Someone's hope for a better future. It was such a simple concept, yet it seemed to drive every human decision he had witnessed. That evening, Rodriguez joined him on the observation deck. The young human moved carefully, still recovering from his injuries, but he seemed determined to be useful despite his condition. "You didn't have to help today," Rodriguez said quietly. "The rescue wasn't your responsibility." 800 lives, Zektar replied. "How could I not help? A week ago, you would have called it inefficient to risk your ship for strangers." Zektar considered this. "A week ago, I thought differently about many things." Rodriguez nodded. "That's what humans do, Commander. We change people. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But we always change them. It's because we refuse to accept that things can't be different." "What do you mean?" "Every other species I've met accepts the universe as it is. Valkyrie culture values elegance and efficiency, so you work within those parameters. The Zektar Empire focuses on order and hierarchy, so they maintain rigid structures. The Cylon Collective prioritizes knowledge and logic above all else." Rodriguez gestured toward the viewport, where stars wheeled slowly past. "But humans? We look at the universe and see problems to solve. Our homeworld tried to kill us, so we conquered it. Space is hostile and vast, so we built ships to cross it anyway. Other species say something is impossible, and humans take that as a challenge." Zektar thought about the refugee transport, built to save every passenger. He thought about the human fleet at the pirate base, accepting destruction to protect others. He thought about Commander Chen, still asking about the mission even as her ship died around her. "Your people suffer for this philosophy," he said. "True," Rodriguez agreed. "But we also achieve things that other species consider impossible. We establish colonies on worlds that should be uninhabitable. We build relationships with species that have nothing in common with us. We fight battles we can't win and somehow find a way to win them anyway." Dr. Velmoth approached them, interrupting their conversation. "Mr. Rodriguez, you should return to medical. Your healing is progressing well, but you need rest." As Rodriguez prepared to leave, he turned back to Zektar. "Commander, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "When we get back to the station, there's going to be an investigation into what happened at the pirate base. Command is going to ask why the human fleet was destroyed while the Valkyrie ships survived." What are you going to tell them? Zektar hadn't thought about the political ramifications of the mission. In the aftermath of battle and rescue operations, the cold reality of military bureaucracy seemed distant and unimportant. But Rodriguez was right. There would be questions, and some of those questions would be accusatory. "I will tell them the truth," Zektar said finally. "The human fleet saved the mission and protected civilian trade routes at the cost of their own lives. They fought with honor and courage." Rodriguez smiled. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." As the young human left for medical, Zektar remained on the observation deck, watching the stars. In a few days, they would reach the Joint Command Station, and he would have to file his reports about the mission. He would have to explain how a simple pirate elimination had turned into a bloodbath, and why the humans had been willing to die for strangers they had never met. But more than that, he would have to explain how his own understanding had changed, how humans had shown him that there were things more important than efficiency and elegance, how they had demonstrated that true strength came not from superior technology or tactics, but from an unshakable commitment to doing what was right, regardless of the cost. Commander Chen was still in a coma, her body slowly healing from injuries that should have killed her. But her sacrifice had saved hundreds of civilian ships and thousands of lives. Somehow, Zektar suspected she would consider that a fair trade. The stars continued their ancient dance across the viewport, indifferent to the struggles of the small creatures who moved among them. But Zektar was beginning to understand that humans looked at those same stars and saw not indifference, but opportunity. They saw challenges to overcome, distances to cross, and possibilities to explore. Perhaps that was what strength really meant. Not the power to destroy, but the will to build. Not the ability to conquer, but the courage to sacrifice for others. Not the wisdom to avoid danger, but the determination to face it when something important was at stake. As the Wind Dancer continued its journey home, Zektar found himself wondering what other lessons the humans might have to teach him. He had learned about their courage in battle and their willingness to sacrifice for strangers. But Rodriguez had hinted at something more, a fundamental difference in how humans approached life itself. The investigation awaiting them at the command station would be difficult. There would be hard questions about tactics and losses, about why the Velkari had survived while the humans had not. But Zektar was no longer worried about those questions. He had seen humans at their best, and he understood now that some things were worth more than survival. Some things were worth dying for. And perhaps more importantly, some things were worth living for. The Joint Command Station orbited the gas giant Kepler 438b like a metal moon, its rotating sections generating artificial gravity for the dozens of species that worked within its halls. As the Wind Dancer approached the docking bay, Zektar could see other vessels arriving, ships from across the Alliance, their crews coming to hear the report of the Kepler 442 operation. Word had already spread about the battle. The destruction of the pirate base was being hailed as a major victory, but the loss of the human fleet had created a political storm. Some species were questioning the wisdom of joint operations with humans, calling them reckless and unpredictable. Admiral Carthex, the Velkari fleet commander, met Zektar at the airlock. The old warrior's mandibles were set in a grim line, his ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine. Behind him stood General Harrison, the human military liaison, her uniform crisp despite the obvious strain in her eyes. "Commander," Admiral Carthex said formally, "the Fleet Council is waiting for your report. There are questions about what happened out there." Zektar nodded, then turned to General Harrison. "How many survivors were we able to recover?" 18, Harrison said quietly. "Out of nearly 200 crew members. Commander Chen is still in critical condition, but the doctors say she'll recover." The briefing room was packed with representatives from a dozen species. Zektar recognized faces from across the Alliance. Jektar military strategists, Cylon intelligence analysts, Melody diplomatic observers, and others. The atmosphere was tense, with quiet conversations stopping as he entered. Admiral Carthex called the meeting to order. Commander Zektar will now present his report on the Kepler 442 operation. Commander, proceed. Zektar activated the holographic display and began his presentation. He laid out the facts methodically: the intelligence reports that had underestimated the pirate presence, the discovery that their stealth approach had been detected, the human fleet's sacrifice to enable the mission's success. When he finished, the questions began immediately. "Commander," said strategist Vexilon of the Jektar Empire, "why didn't the human fleet retreat when they realized the situation was hopeless?" "Because retreating would have meant abandoning the mission," Zektar replied. "But the mission wasn't worth the loss of an entire fleet. Surely the tactical situation called for withdrawal and regrouping." Zektar considered his words carefully. The humans believed the mission was worth the cost. Cylon analyst Morden leaned forward. "This is precisely the problem with human military doctrine. They prioritize emotional responses over logical analysis. Their inability to calculate acceptable losses makes them unsuitable for joint operations." General Harrison stood. "With respect, Analyst Morden, my people didn't fail to calculate the losses. They chose to accept them." "Which is illogical," Morden replied coldly. "No objective is worth the destruction of an entire fleet." "No objective?" Harrison's voice carried an edge that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Those pirates had attacked 17 civilian convoys in the past month. They had stolen medical supplies meant for colony worlds, food shipments for refugee camps, and construction materials for disaster relief. How many civilian deaths would have been acceptable while we waited for a more convenient time to strike? Strategist Vexilon clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Civilian casualties are regrettable, but they cannot justify wasteful military tactics." Zektar watched the debate with growing frustration. These delegates spoke of tactics and losses as if they were discussing cargo manifests, not the lives of sentient beings. The memory of Commander Chen asking about the mission even as her ship died around her seemed to mock their cold calculations. "If I may," Zektar said, interrupting the argument. The room fell silent. "I believe we are discussing the wrong question." Admiral Carthex looked surprised. "Commander, the question is not whether human tactics are logical or efficient. The question is whether they are effective." Zektar gestured to the holographic display, which still showed the destroyed pirate base. "The mission was successful. The pirates are eliminated, the trade routes are secure, and civilian convoys are safe. By what measure was this a failure?" Analyst Morden's mechanical voice carried a note of incredulity. "By the measure of cost, Commander. The humans lost an entire fleet. And in exchange, they saved thousands of civilian lives and secured the outer colonies," Zektar replied. "If that is not an acceptable trade to you, then perhaps the problem is not with human tactics, but with our definition of success." The room erupted in startled conversation. Several delegates looked shocked that a Velkari commander would defend human military doctrine. Admiral Carthex raised his hand for silence. "Commander," the Admiral said carefully, "are you saying that you approve of the human approach to warfare?" Zektar thought about his time aboard the Wind Dancer, watching human survivors heal from injuries that should have been fatal. He thought about Rodriguez explaining why humans built their ships to save every passenger. He thought about the New Haven and 800 refugees who were alive because humans refused to accept that some things were impossible. "I am saying that humans understand something we have forgotten," Zektar said. "They understand that the purpose of strength is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. They understand that the purpose of military force is not to demonstrate superiority, but to preserve what is worth preserving." General Harrison was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Several other delegates looked confused or angry, but Zektar continued. The humans call it humanity finna yeah, a crude phrase that captures something profound. It is not about human superiority or dominance. It is about the willingness to stand up when others will not, to fight when others will not, to sacrifice when others will not. It is about refusing to accept that things cannot be better. Strategist Vexilon stood abruptly. This is precisely the kind of thinking that leads to unnecessary casualties. Military operations should be based on logic and calculation, not emotional appeals. Then explain this, Zektar said, calling up a new display. It showed the rescue of the New Haven, complete with navigational data from their passage through the gravitational anomalies. We diverted course to rescue 800 civilians from a failing transport. By your logic, this was wasteful and unnecessary. We risked our ship and crew for strangers we had never met. He paused, looking around the room. But if we had not acted, 800 beings would have died. Families, children, elderly refugees seeking new homes in the outer colonies. Was their preservation worth the risk? According to human philosophy, yes. According to our calculations, no. Analyst Morden's mechanical voice was flat. The preservation of 800 random individuals cannot justify risking a military vessel and its crew. Cannot justify? Zektar felt anger rising in his chest, an emotion he rarely allowed himself to express. Those 800 beings represent the future of human expansion into the outer colonies. They carry with them the knowledge, skills, and determination needed to build new worlds. They are farmers and engineers, teachers and doctors, artists and builders. Their loss would have been felt for generations. He gestured to the data display. But more than that, their rescue demonstrates what human strength really means. It is not about having the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. It is about the willingness to use whatever strength you have in service of others. The room was silent now. Even strategist Vexilon had sat down, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. General Harrison was watching Zektar with an expression that seemed to mix surprise and gratitude. Admiral Carthex spoke slowly. Commander, are you recommending that the fleet adopt human military doctrine? I am recommending that we learn from it, Zektar replied. Human tactics may seem crude or inefficient, but they are based on a fundamental understanding that we have lost. They know that the strong exist to protect the weak, that the capable have a duty to help the incapable, that those with power must use it responsibly. He paused, thinking of Commander Chen lying in the medical bay. The humans taught me that true strength is not the ability to dominate others, but the willingness to sacrifice for them. It is not about being the fastest or the strongest or the smartest. It is about standing firm when everything around you is falling apart. Dr. Velmoth's voice came over the comm system, interrupting the meeting. Commander Zektar, please report to Medical Bay 7. Commander Chen is conscious and asking for you. The briefing was adjourned with no formal conclusion, though Zektar suspected the debate would continue for hours. As he made his way to the medical bay, General Harrison fell into step beside him. That was unexpected, she said. I've never heard a Velkari speak that way about human military doctrine. Your people changed my perspective, Zektar replied. Perhaps they can change others as well. They found Commander Chen sitting up in her hospital bed, looking pale but alert. Her left arm was still in a regeneration cast, and there were healing burns visible on her neck and jaw, but her eyes were clear and focused. Commander Zektar, she said, managing a weak smile. I hear I missed an interesting briefing. You missed very little, Zektar replied, though I suspect the political ramifications are only beginning. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Rodriguez told me about the rescue operation. 800 civilians? The transport, New Haven. Families heading to the outer colonies. Good, Chen said simply. That's what it's about, you know. Not the battles or the glory or the tactical victories. It's about giving people the chance to build better lives. General Harrison leaned forward. Sarah, the investigation committee is going to want to debrief you about the pirate battle. There are questions about whether the fleet could have been saved if different tactics had been used. Chen's expression hardened slightly. Different tactics? Like what? Abandoning the mission and letting the pirates continue attacking civilian convoys? Some are suggesting that the human fleet should have waited for reinforcements rather than engaging immediately. And how many merchant ships would have been attacked while we waited? Chen asked. How many refugee transports would have been destroyed? How many colony supply runs would have been raided? She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing from her injuries. General, the committee can ask all the questions they want. My answer will be the same. We did our job. We protected the innocent and eliminated a threat to civilian shipping. If that cost us our lives, then so be it. Zektar watched this exchange with fascination. Even wounded and recovering from near-death injuries, Chen was more concerned about civilian casualties than her own survival or career prospects. It was exactly the attitude Rodriguez had described. Humans simply refused to accept that things couldn't be better. Commander Chen, Zektar said, may I ask you something? Of course. When your ship was dying and your fleet was being destroyed, you maintained position to provide cover for our infiltration mission. You knew it would likely cost you your life. Why? Chen looked at him for a long moment before answering. Commander, where I come from, we have a saying, the strong protect the weak. It's not about being heroes or seeking glory. It's about recognizing that with capability comes responsibility. She gestured weakly toward the viewport, where the gas giant's swirling atmosphere was visible through the medical bay window. Out there are millions of beings trying to build better lives for themselves and their families. They're farmers on frontier worlds, merchants running supply routes, refugees seeking new homes. They can't protect themselves from pirates and raiders. Chen paused, her voice growing stronger despite her obvious fatigue. So we do it for them, not because we're better than other species, but because we can, because someone has to. Because if we don't stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves, who will? Zektar felt something shift in his understanding, a final piece of a puzzle falling into place. You sacrifice not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to choose sacrifice. Now you're getting it, Chen said with a smile. True strength isn't about what you can take. It's about what you're willing to give. General Harrison was watching the conversation with interest. Commander Zektar, if you don't mind my asking, how has this experience changed your view of joint operations? Zektar considered the question carefully. I came to Kepler 442 believing that humans were inferior warriors, slow, clumsy, technologically primitive. I have learned that I was measuring the wrong things. He gestured toward Chen. Humans may not be the fastest or the strongest or the most advanced species in the Alliance, but they possess something that all our technology and training cannot replicate: the willingness to do what is right regardless of the cost. And that matters in warfare? Harrison asked. It matters in everything, Zektar replied. Warfare, diplomacy, exploration, colonization. In every endeavor, there comes a moment when logic and calculation fail, when the situation requires someone to step forward and accept responsibility for the outcome. Humans step forward. Other species hesitate. Chen was nodding slowly. That's what we've been trying to tell the Alliance for decades. It's not about human exceptionalism or superiority, it's about human responsibility. We don't fight because we're better than other species. We fight because someone has to. As Zektar prepared to leave the medical bay, Chen called out to him. Commander, there's something else I want you to understand about strength. He turned back to her. The hardest part isn't the fighting or the dying or the sacrificing. The hardest part is living with the choices you make. Every human who puts on a military uniform knows that someday they might have to trade their life for others. But we also know that we'll have to live with the consequences of our actions, the friends we lose, the enemies we make, the lines we cross. Chen's voice grew quiet. True strength isn't the willingness to die for your beliefs. It's the willingness to live with the weight of your choices, to carry the responsibility for what you've done, and to keep going anyway. That's what humans understand that other species don't. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive. As Zektar left the medical bay, Chen's words echoed in his mind. He thought about the human survivors aboard his ship, healing from injuries that should have killed them. He thought about the refugees on the New Haven, continuing their journey to new worlds despite the dangers they had faced. He thought about the merchant crews who would safely deliver their cargoes because the pirate threat had been eliminated. Fighting alongside humans had taught him that strength came in many forms. Physical power, technological superiority, and tactical brilliance were all useful, but they meant nothing without the will to use them properly. True strength was the courage to stand firm when others would not, to sacrifice when others could not, to take responsibility when others would not. Humans had that strength in abundance, and perhaps with their example, other species could learn to find it within themselves as well. The day he learned what strength really means was the day Zektar understood that the future of the Alliance depended not on who had the most advanced ships or the most elegant tactics, but on who was willing to use their capabilities in service of something greater than themselves. In that understanding, humans stood alone, but they didn't have to stand alone forever.